This is the Unfinished Relationship Podcast.
In this chapter of my divorce story, I'll talk about costs. A lot of guys are put off proceeding with divorce because of the costs, fighting for their kids because of the costs. But at the end of the day, fact of the matter is that what can you do? Keeping it 100, as they say. I think it's important for guys out there to realize, because it's mostly guys who wind up on the wrong end of the divorce situation. The thing you need to remember is the average cost for a divorce in the UK is going to be anywhere from 12 to 20,000 pounds, and that depends on where you get your lawyer from. 9 times out of 10, you may not qualify for legal aid, which means you have to pay for it by yourself, whereas she's on legal aid. In those cases, especially if she's the one who's initiated it and now you're fighting to see your kids. Let me first call out one point. Divorce is made up of 3 parts, and I'm only interested in talking about divorces which involve families, i.e. mother, father, children. So there's 3 parts to a divorce. That's the first thing you need to know. The first part of the divorce is the actual divorce itself, the annulment or breaking of the marriage agreement, i.e. the legal document. That's the first part of the divorce. The second part of the divorce is access or custody of the children. Who gets to keep the kids? Where do the kids reside? Etc., etc. And then the third part of the divorce is the division of assets, property, jewelry, cash in the bank, so on and so forth. For anybody considering divorce, my advice is, no matter how brutal you think the conversation may be, how acrimonious that conversation may be, it is better for all parties, especially the children, if the parents can sit down and discuss the nature of the divorce before going to court. It is better for the parents to come up with an agreement, which they then sign on, and then all the lawyers and the courts have to do is ratify that arrangement. Because the moment you go into this divorce process, honest to goodness, you're going to be looking at paying anywhere from 10 to 20,000 at a minimum. And if one of you, especially the one holding the kids, because that's usually how it goes, decides that they are not going to not necessarily be compliant, but at least be agreeable to a certain degree, and the other party feels that they need to keep fighting, everything will be lost. That is my story, which I will go into at some point. But I just thought, people should know, if you're going to go into a divorce, it's not cheap. I don't care what women's groups tell you or what your friends, mates down the bar tell you. It is not a cheap process. We need to also recognize the fact that the majority of divorces are initiated by the woman, either by moving out or raising some kind of complaint. Whether it's real or otherwise is another story. Also, divorce is made much easier by the fact that the complainant, i.e. generally the wife, can use excuses like abuse or whether or not there was actual abuse, it's neither here nor there, because you're usually guilty as a man right from the get-go. But the moment those words come out, you know that she qualifies for legal aid. At least that's been my experience. She can get legal aid and somebody else is carrying the can, at least for a while. Whereas as a man, you now have to go to court. You've never been through this process. You've got to find a lawyer. I mean, you could go in there cold and try and teach yourself, but until you see the process in action, it's very difficult. For most people, it will be very difficult. It's full of legal mumbo jumbo, and it's not plain language. Understanding what is a C1A, what is a non-molestation order, what is a occupation order, all these kind of things. And in the following episodes, I will be going through some of those things, just to educate people from my own personal experience. My divorce lasted 2.5 years plus, and she's still trying to take me to court again. Not something I want, but she's decided that she wants to take me to court. And I'll go into that as we go through these various episodes. I will try and keep a lot of my musings and my talking points to about 10 minutes or less. But if I feel the need to go over, I will. But yeah, this is my first foray into podcasting. And thank you very much for listening to what I have to say. What I will reiterate is that if you're considering going into divorce, make sure you have some kind of war chest available to you. Otherwise, you're just going to have to defend yourself in there. Or because you're divided into two camps. They are the applicant, the person applying, and the respondent, the person replying. If she has left the house and has not initiated divorce proceedings but is withholding the children, then really you are headed towards divorce. I mean, we can tell you no matter which way you cut it. If, on the other hand, you have the kids and she's fighting, well, maybe it might be a bit easier. I've not been in that situation. My situation, she left the house, took the kids, and the next thing I knew, I had a non-molestation order sitting in my inbox. Let me explain some of what happened in that first week after she moved out. She moved out. As I was later to discover, she had told people, I don't know who, probably some women's group, I don't know, that I had abused her, I had withheld funds and all sorts of stories which it would take me 6 months before I could exonerate myself from some of these allegations and charges. But regardless, when the first thing that came through the door was the first thing that came through the door in terms of court was the non-molestation, a request for a non-molestation order and a what do they call it? It's called a non-molestation order and an occupation order. And let me explain to the uninitiated. A non-molestation order is equivalent to what we would see on TV dramas as an injunction, a court injunction, basically to say, I'm not going to get in contact with this person. And it is usually for a period. It can be days, weeks, months, or years. It is up to the discretion of the court. It can be downgraded from being an order, because when it is an order, it carries consequences. And those consequences could result in a fine. They could result in a jail stint if you breach it, etc., etc. So the consequences can be quite severe on both parties if the judge is being fair. But a non-molestation order basically means I don't want to talk to you and I don't want you within X number of feet of me, etc., etc. The occupation order is a slightly different beast. An occupation order is about removing you from your accommodation so that he or she, the person who wants to leave, who has left the house, can move back into the house or can force you to be vacated from the house. So an occupation order basically means to take over your property or where you live. It's difficult for them to enforce an occupation order on a rental because somebody's got to pay the rent. I mean, that is essentially what happened with me. She couldn't enforce an occupation order for two reasons. One, she was being set up by the council for accommodation. And two, we were living in rented accommodation at the time of the divorce. Though she tried to use the argument that I have friends in the neighborhood and relatives in the neighborhood, not true. It wouldn't stand. So the court basically said they dismissed that request. But then for the non-molestation, we wound up taking what they called an undertaking, which is less than a court order, but it is an agreement. It is a mutual agreement. It's almost as if to prove, can you two work together on what is on the steps that are to follow. So my undertaking lasted for a year. We had hoped that all the proceedings would be over and done with within a year. But as you will see in the following episodes of my podcast, that was not to be the case. Thank you very much for your time. Good night. God bless, and Catch you on the next one.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.